Okay, so think about this. You wake up on a Saturday, probably thinking about the weekend, and then bam, news breaks about this massive explosion.
Right, not just anywhere, but thousands of miles away at a major Iranian port, Shahid Rajaee.
Exactly. And the first reports, they were pretty alarming, weren't they? Hundreds injured, huge plumes of smoke.
Yeah, a massive fire. It sounded chaotic. And as the day went on, the picture got, well, sadly, clearer. Confirmed deaths, lots of people needing hospital treatment.
It clearly was a major, major event.
Oh, absolutely. The scale, reports said the blast was felt quite far away.
Yeah.
That tells you something about the power involved.
And those casualty figures evolving. First estimates, then confirmed numbers climbing 8, then 14 dead.
And the injured count.
Yeah.
Some sources were saying up to 750 people. Hundreds, anyway. Just highlights the human tragedy of it all.
Definitely. An event like this, especially in such a strategic spot, it really can ripple outwards.
Which is why we wanted to dig into this.
Right. So for this deep dive, we're going beyond just the headlines. We've got news reports, some briefing documents, even accounts from people closer to the scene.
Our mission really is to piece together what happened, what we actually know, with some confidence.
And maybe the most important part, why should we care? Why does an explosion at this port matter more than you might think at first glance?
Exactly. And to really get that wider impact, you have to understand the place itself. Shahid Rajaee Port.
It's near Bandar Abbas, right?
Yes. And it's not just any port. It's Iran's most advanced container facility. And crucially, it's right there near the Strait of Hormuz.
Ah, the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, that rings a bell. Huge oil traffic goes through there.
A massive amount. Maybe around a fifth of the world's oil supply passes through that narrow channel. So any disruption nearby.
Yeah, it gets attention.
It certainly does. And the descriptions from the port right after the blast.
Yeah.
They sounded pretty intense.
Dramatic, yeah. Thick black smoke, a huge fire, reports of containers just exploding one after another. It sounds like pure chaos, like it escalated really fast.
The timeline suggests exactly that.
Yeah.
An initial blast, then maybe secondary explosions as the fire just ripped through the container storage areas.
And the number of injured people, even the early reports mentioned hundreds.
Right, it speaks to the force of the explosion, the blast wave, how far debris must have flown, and then, tragically, the death toll rising as rescuers worked. It's grim.
So, okay, beyond the immediate devastation, let's talk cause. What did the Iranian authorities say happened? What's the official line?
Well, the main story, the one that came out pretty consistently from officials from customs authorities, was that several containers detonated.
Containers containing what, though?
That seems to be the key point in the official narrative. Chemicals. Either specific chemicals inside those containers or just, hazardous materials stored in that part of the port.
Okay, so hazardous materials, maybe flammable stuff. Makes sense with a huge fire.
Precisely. Early on, they mentioned flammable materials probably igniting, and the weather might have played a part. It was apparently quite hot, around 40 degrees Celsius, maybe 104 Fahrenheit. So high temperatures could have been a factor in ignition. Plus, officials also hinted at, let's say, issues with how these materials were stored or handled. Poor storage, maybe improper procedures being contributing factors.
So kind of pointing towards an accident caused by negligence or bad practices.
That seems to be the direction of the official explanation. But it's important to add, a government spokesperson did say the exact cause was still under investigation. So chemicals suspected, but not definitively pinpointed yet.
Right. The official story points one way, but these things often have, well, other theories floating around. What else came up?
And this is where it gets perhaps a bit more complicated. There was a private security firm, Ambry, that put forward a different idea.
Okay. What did they suggest?
They speculated it wasn't just general hazardous stuff, but maybe something more specific. Improper handling of solid fuel meant for Iran's ballistic missiles.
Whoa, missile fuel. That's quite different from general chemicals. What led them to that?
They actually named a specific chemical, sodium perchlorate. Apparently, there were reports of a shipment of this coming from China back in March. They even cited a Financial Times piece from January about that shipment. And there's more potential backing for this theory, too.
What?
A defense analyst looked at the smoke. Apparently, the initial smoke had this distinct yellow color.
Yellow smoke. What does that signify?
Yellow often indicates the presence of sodium. And sodium is a key component of, you guessed it, sodium perchlorate.
Interesting.
And there were also reports, apparently, of some reddish smoke before the main blast, which again could point towards certain chemicals being involved. Sodium perchlorate is a powerful oxidizer. It's pretty common in solid rocket fuel.
So you've got the official hazardous materials accident theory, and then this more specific, maybe more sensitive missile fuel theory backed by smoke color analysis. Any other possibilities mentioned? I think I saw something about potential Israeli involvement.
Yes, that did come up. There was some chatter on social media. One embedded tweet in an article mentioned it, raising the possibility.
But was there any official backing for that?
No, and it's really important to stress that. The person who tweeted it specifically said they didn't know the cause. And crucially, from all the reports we saw, no Iranian official, at least not initially, publicly blamed an attack.
Okay. But there is some history there, right, at that specific port?
There is. Shahid Rajaee was hit by a cyber attack back in 2020, which was widely attributed to Israel. And more recently, February 2024, there was that gas pipeline attack in Iran. So the context is there.
But Israel hasn't commented on this explosion.
No comment from Israel reported in the sources we looked at.
And one more timing thing. Didn't this happen right when U.S.-Iran nuclear talks were starting up again in Oman?
It did coincide with that, yes. The timing is noticeable.
Any suggestion of a link, though?
No. The sources we have explicitly state there was no indicated link between the port explosion and those diplomatic talks starting.
Okay. So we have the event, the tragic aftermath, and these competing ideas about the cause. Let's pivot to the why it matters part. Why is this port so significant?
This is really key to understanding the potential fallout. Shahid Rajaee isn't just important, it's absolutely critical for Iran's economy.
That's so.
It's their #1 container port, the most modern one they have. It handles the lion's share of their containerized goods, imports, and exports.
Do we have any numbers on that, like percentages?
The estimates are pretty striking. Something like over 55% of Iran's total exports and imports, maybe 70% of their maritime transit traffic, and a huge chunk, maybe 85% of all their container operations.
Wow, those are dominant figures.
Absolutely. It highlights just how central it is. So, given Iran's economic situation, dealing with sanctions and needing trade, a major hit to this port is going to be felt across the whole country.
You can see how that would ripple out. What kind of immediate economic effects might they be facing?
Well, short term, you're looking at delays getting essential goods into the country. That can easily mean higher import costs for everyone.
And businesses waiting for parts or materials.
Exactly. Industries needing imported raw materials could face shortages, disrupting production. All of this can stir up prices, create volatility in the market.
Okay, that's the immediate hit. What about looking a bit further down the road? Medium-term consequences.
Those could be pretty serious, too. You might see backups at other Iranian ports, trying to pick up the slack, leading to congestion, delays for ships.
It costs money, right? Demurrage fees.
Right, those penalties for ships being held up. Then there's the trust factor. International shipping lines, trade partners, they might become wary. That could hurt Iran's export competitiveness.
And I guess insurance costs could go up, too, for shipping to Iran.
Very possibly. Higher transport costs, higher insurance premiums, and it could disrupt established trade routes in the region as well. It's amazing how one incident at one port can cause such waves.
It really paints a picture of it being a vital artery for their economy.
It absolutely is. It's how they get basic goods in, crucial industrial equipment, and it facilitates their non-oil exports, which are super important right now.
So a major slowdown or damage there, that could really put a dent in their economic growth, maybe even affect jobs.
Definitely could impact growth and employment. And it's worth stressing again, there isn't really another port in Iran that can just absorb all the volume that Shahid Rajaee handles. They don't have the capacity elsewhere.
Okay, the economic side is clearly huge. Let's switch back to the immediate aftermath on the ground. What was the response like from emergency services and authorities?
The response seems to have been rapid. Emergency teams were dispatched quickly to the port. The first priority, of course, was getting the injured out, getting them to hospitals.
Which must have been a huge task with potentially hundreds injured.
A massive logistical challenge, no doubt.
And what happened at the port itself? Operations just stopped.
Completely halted, yes, understandably. They also temporarily suspended certain export and transit shipments that were already on their way to customs there. So that disruption to trade we talked about, it started immediately.
I also read something about a public health emergency being declared. What was that about?
Yes, that's important. Because of the chemicals potentially involved, there were concerns about hazardous pollutants being released into the air.
Like what kind of pollutants?
Ammonia, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide were mentioned specifically. So the health ministry declared a public health emergency in Bandar Abbas.
What did that mean for residents?
They advised people nearby to stay indoors, limit outdoor activity, And especially for vulnerable groups, kids, the elderly, people with respiratory issues, they strongly recommended wearing masks.
Wow, so they were definitely concerned about air quality, serious stuff. Any other notable responses?
Well, there were reports that intelligence units from the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, took control of the port area fairly quickly after the blast.
The IRGC stepping in. What does that suggest?
It suggests a high level of official concern, wanting to secure the site, probably for investigation purposes, control the flow of information, that sort of thing.
And I think there were reports about internet issues, too.
Yeah, reports of internet disruptions in Bandar Abbas right afterwards. The sources didn't explicitly say why. Could be overload, could be intentional. Hard to say for sure based on what we have.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier, this port and Iranian infrastructure generally has seen incidents before.
That's right. There's that history. The 2020 cyber attack on this very port. Other incidents at industrial sites, energy facilities, sometimes blamed on negligence, sometimes on, well, external actors. That history definitely adds a layer of context to how this event is viewed.
Did the international community react much?
There were expressions of solidarity, yeah. Several countries, particularly in the region, UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia, but also others like Russia and Japan, sent messages of support to Iran. Some even offered help.
Interesting. Shows some level of, well, humanitarian concern cutting across political lines sometimes.
It can happen, yes, especially in the face of a clear disaster with significant casualties.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to boil it down. What are the main things we should take away from all this?
I think the biggest takeaways are, one, this was a major disaster at an incredibly strategic location for Iran with tragic human consequences, the deaths and injuries.
And
two, the potential for significant economic fallout for Iran because of this port's vital role in their trade. The damage, the disruption, it's serious.
And thirdly, perhaps the big question mark hanging over the cause.
Absolutely. That uncertainty is key. You have the official narrative leaning towards an accident involving poorly stored chemicals.
But then you have that other compelling theory involving missile fuel, potentially supported by things like the smoke color analysis.
Exactly. Two, quote, different possibilities, each with its own implications.
So when you put it all together, the port's importance, the casualties, these conflicting potential causes, the economic risk, the geopolitical backdrop, what's the final thought you'd leave our listeners with? What should they be pondering?
I think this incident, with all its unknowns, really highlights just how fragile some of these critical points in global trade can be and how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
You know, an explosion at one port can echo through economies and potentially raise geopolitical temperatures. It makes you think about safety, about security, not just there, but at similar vital hubs everywhere. And maybe ask, how resilient are these systems, really? Regardless of whether this was an accident or something else, it shows a vulnerability. What other vulnerabilities like this exist that maybe we aren't thinking about? That's the question it raises for me.
That's a powerful point. A lot to think about, definitely. Thank you for walking us through all the details and complexities here. It's clear there's much more to this than just a news headline.
My pleasure. It's important to unpack these events and see the different layers involved.
And for you listening, we hope this deep dive gave you a clearer picture. We encourage you to think about the different angles, the information from the various sources we discussed, keep an eye out for any further updates, and consider those broader implications we just touched on.